The Untold Story of Volodymyr Zelensky. Full Biography of Ukrainian President. Part 2. Zelensky appointed Andriy Bohdan as head of the presidential administration of Ukraine. Prior to this, Bohdan had been the lawyer of Ukrainian oligarch Ihor Kolomoisky. Under the rules of lustration in Ukraine, introduced in 2014 following Euromaidan, Bohdan is not entitled to hold any state office until 2024. Bohdan, however, contended that because heading the presidential administration is not considered civil service work, lustration did not apply to him. A number of the members of the presidential administration Zelensky appointed were former colleagues from his former production company, Kvartal 95, including Ivan Bakanov, who became deputy head of the Ukrainian Secret Service. Former Deputy Foreign Minister Olna Serkal declined an appointment as deputy head of the presidential administration, but did agree to serve as the Ukrainian representative of the international courts concerning Russia. Zelensky's requests to replace the foreign minister, defense minister, chief prosecutor, and head of Ukraine's security service were rejected by parliament. Zelensky also dismissed and replaced 20 of the governors of Ukraine's 24 oblasts. In the 21st of July 2019 parliamentary election, Zelensky's political party, Servant of the People, won the first single-party majority in modern Ukrainian history in parliament. With 43% of the party list vote, his party gained 254 of the 424 seats. Following the elections, Zelensky nominated Oleksiy Honcharuk as prime minister, who was quickly confirmed by parliament. Parliament also confirmed Andriy Zaharodny as defense minister, Vadim Prystaiko as foreign minister, and Ivan Bakanov as head of the SBU. Arsen Avakov, a controversial figure due to long-standing corruption allegations, was kept on as interior minister, with Honcharuk arguing that the relatively inexperienced government needed experienced administrators and that Avakov had been drawn red lines that cannot be crossed. Zelensky dismissed Bohdan as head of his presidential administration on the 11th of February 2020 and appointed Andriy Yermak as his successor the same day. On the 6th of March 2020, the Honcharuk government gave way to the government of Denis Shmyhal. At the time, there was disquiet in the press over the hasty departure of Honcharuk. In his 4th of March address to the Rada, Zelensky recommitted to reforms domestic and financial, and remarked that he cannot always become a psychologist for people, a crisis manager for someone, a collector who requires honestly earned money, and a nanny of the ministry in charge. By September 2020, Zelensky's approval ratings had fallen to less than 32%. On the 24th of March 2021, Zelensky signed the Decree 117/2021 approving the strategy for deoccupation and reintegration of the temporarily occupied territory of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol. One of Zelensky's central campaign promises had been to end the Russo-Ukrainian War and resolve the Russia-sponsored separatist movement there. On the 3rd of June, Zelensky appointed former President Leonid Kuchma as Ukraine's representative in the tripartite contact group for a settlement in the conflict. On the 11th of July 2019, Zelensky held his first telephone conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin, during which he urged Putin to enter into talks mediated by European countries. The two leaders also discussed the exchange of prisoners held by both sides. In October 2019, Zelensky announced a preliminary deal struck with the separatists, under which the Ukrainian government would respect elections held in the region in exchange for Russia withdrawing its unmarked troops. The deal was met with heavy criticism and protests by both politicians and the Ukrainian public. Detractors noted that elections held in Donbas were unlikely to be free and fair, that the separatists had long driven out most pro-Ukrainian residents out of the region to ensure a pro-Russia majority, and that it would be impossible to ensure Russia kept its end of the agreement. Zelensky defended his negotiations, saying the elections would not be held before a Russian withdrawal. The agreement failed to ease the conflict, as the separatists continued their attacks and Russia continued providing them with weapons and ammunition. Several Ukrainian nationalist militias and former militias also refused to accept the agreement, including the far-right Azov fighters in the Luhansk region of Donbas. Zelensky met personally with some of these groups and tried to convince them to surrender their unregistered weapons and accept the peace accord. Andriy Bieletsky, the leader of the far-right National Corps and first commander of Azov, accused Zelensky of being disrespectful to army veterans and of acting on behalf of the Kremlin by leaving Ukrainians vulnerable to Russian aggression. Ultimately, the peace deal failed to reduce the violence, much less end the war. In December 2019, Russia and Ukraine agreed to resume talks mediated by France and Germany under the so-called Normandy format, which had been abandoned in 2016. It was Zelensky's first face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin. In July 2020, Zelensky announced a formal ceasefire with the separatists, the more than 20th such attempt since the war began in 2014. Although the ceasefire was frequently violated over the next few years, and overall violence remained high, ceasefire violations in 2020 did decrease by over 50% compared to the previous year. On the 8th of January 2020, the presidential office announced that Volodymyr Zelensky was cutting his trip to Oman short owing to the Ukraine International Airlines Flight 752 plane crash in nearby Iran the same day. The same day, internet news site obozrevetal.com released information that on the 7th of January 2020, Ukrainian politician of the opposition platform for Life Viktor Medvedchuk, who has exclusive relations with the current president of Russia, may have arrived in Oman. Soon, rumors began that Zelensky may have had some additional meetings beside the ones that were announced. On the 14th of January 2020, Andriy Yermak dismissed the rumors as speculations and baseless conspiracy theories, while Medvedchuk stated that the plane was used by his older daughter's family to fly from Oman to Moscow. Later, Yermak contacted the online newspaper Ukrainian Truth and gave more details about the visit to Oman and the plane crash in Iran. On the 17th of January 2020, the presidential appointee Minister of Foreign Affairs Vadim Prystaiko was unable to give answers during the times of questions to the government in parliament when the People's Deputies of Ukraine asked him about the visit's official agenda, the invitation from Oman, officials of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who were preparing the visit, as well as how the president actually crossed the border while visiting Oman. On the 20th of January 2020, Prystaiko followed up by giving a briefing to the press in the office of the President of Ukraine and saying that he would explain everything about the visit that when the time came. Zelensky's first official trip abroad as president was to Brussels in June 2019, where he met with European Union and NATO officials. In August 2019, Zelensky promised to lift the moratorium on exhuming Polish mass graves in Ukraine after the previous Ukrainian government banned the Polish side from carrying out any exhumations of Polish victims of the Ukrainian insurgent army-perpetrated Volhynian massacres, following the removal of a memorial to the Ukrainian insurgent army in Hrusowice, southeastern Poland. In September 2019, it was reported that U.S. President Donald Trump had allegedly blocked payment of a congressionally mandated $400 million military aid package to Ukraine to pressure Zelensky during a July phone call between the two presidents to investigate alleged wrongdoing by Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden, who took a board seat on Ukrainian natural gas company Burisma Holdings. This report was the catalyst for the Trump-Ukraine scandal and the impeachment inquiry against Donald Trump. Zelensky has denied that he was pressured by Trump and declared that he does not want to interfere in a foreign election. On a trip to the United States in September 2021, Zelensky engaged in talks and commitments with U.S. President Joe Biden, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm, and Secretary of State Antony Blinken. President Zelensky and First Lady Olena Zelenska also took part in the opening of the Ukrainian House in Washington, D.C. On the same trip, he met with Apple CEO Tim Cook and with Ukrainians in senior positions at Silicon Valley tech companies and spoke at Stanford University. While Zelensky was still in the U.S., just after delivering a speech at the United Nations, an assassination attempt was made in Ukraine on Serhiy Shefir, his closest aide. Shefir was unhurt in the attack, although his driver was hospitalized with 3 bullet wounds. In April 2021, in response to Russian military buildup at the Ukrainian borders, Zelensky spoke to American President Joe Biden and urged NATO members to speed up Ukraine's request for membership. On the 26th of November 2021, Zelensky accused Russia and Ukrainian oligarch Rinat Akhmetov of backing a plan to overthrow his government. Russia denied any involvement in a coup plot, and Akhmetov said in a statement that the information made public by Volodymyr Zelensky about attempts to draw me into some kind of coup is an absolute lie. I am outraged by the spread of this lie, no matter what the president's motives are. In December 2021, Zelensky called for preemptive action against Russia. On the 19th of January 2022, Zelensky said in a video message that the country's citizens should not panic and appealed to the media to be methods of mass information and not mass hysteria. On the 28th of January, Zelensky called on the West not to create a panic in his country over a potential Russian invasion, adding that constant warnings of an imminent threat of invasion are putting the economy of Ukraine at risk. Zelensky said that we do not see a bigger escalation than in early 2021 when Russia's military buildup started. Zelensky and U.S. President Joe Biden disagreed on how imminent the threat was. On the 19th of February, as worries of a Russian invasion of Ukraine grew, Zelensky warned the Munich Security Conference that Western nations should abandon their appeasement attitude toward Moscow. Ukraine has been granted security assurances in exchange for giving up the world's third largest nuclear arsenal. We don't have any firearms, and there's no security, but we have a right to urge a transformation from an appeasement policy to one that ensures security and peace, he stated. In the early hours of the 24th of February, shortly before the start of the Russian invasion, Zelensky recorded an address to the citizens of both Ukraine and Russia. He disputed claims of the Russian government about the presence of neo-Nazis in the Ukrainian government and stated that he had no intention of attacking the Donbas region, while highlighting his personal connections to the area. In part of the address, he spoke in Russian to the people of Russia, appealing to them to pressure their leadership to prevent war. Who will suffer the most from this? People who does not want this more than anyone. People who can prevent this. People. Are these people present among you? I am sure there are. Public figures, journalists, musicians, actors, athletes, scientists, doctors, bloggers, stand-up comedians, TikTokers, and many more. Regular people. Regular, normal people. Men, women, the elderly, children, fathers, and most importantly, mothers. Just like people in Ukraine. Just like the authorities in Ukraine. No matter how much they try to convince you otherwise. I know that they will not show this appeal of mine on Russian television. But the citizens of Russia must see it. They must know the truth. And the truth is that this needs to stop before it is too late. And if the Russian leadership does not want to sit down at the table with us for the sake of peace, then perhaps they will sit down at the table with you. Do Russians want war? I would very much like to answer this question. But the answer depends only on you, the citizens of the Russian Federation. The speech was widely described as emotional and astonishing. On the morning of the 24th of February, Putin announced that Russia was initiating a special military operation in the Donbas. Russian missiles struck a number of military targets in Ukraine, and Zelensky declared martial law. Zelensky also announced that diplomatic relations with Russia were being severed, effective immediately. Later in the day, he announced general mobilization. On the 25th of February, Zelensky said that despite Russia's claim that it was targeting only military sites, civilian sites were also being hit. In an early morning address that day, Zelensky said that his intelligence services had identified him as Russia's top target, but that he is staying in Kiev and his family will remain in the country. They want to destroy Ukraine politically by destroying the head of state, he said. In the early hours of the 26th of February, during the most significant assault by Russian troops on the capital of Kiev, the United States government and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan urged Zelensky to evacuate to a safer location, and both offered assistance for such an effort. Zelensky turned down both offers and opted to remain in Kiev with its defense forces, saying that the fight is here, I need ammunition, not a ride. More than 90% of Ukrainians supported the actions of Zelensky, including more than 90% in West and Central Ukraine and more than 80% in Russian-speaking regions in Eastern and Southern Ukraine. A Pew Research Center poll found that 72% of Americans had confidence in Zelensky's handling of international affairs. Zelensky has gained worldwide recognition as the wartime leader of Ukraine during the Russian invasion. Historian Andrew Roberts compared him to Winston Churchill. Harvard Political Review said that Zelensky has harnessed the power of social media to become history's first truly online wartime leader, bypassing traditional gatekeepers as he uses the internet to reach out to the people. He has been described as a national hero or a global hero by many commentators, including publications such as The Hill, Deutsche Welle, Der Spiegel, and USA Today. BBC News and The Guardian have reported that his response to the invasion has received praise even from previous critics. During the invasion, Zelensky has been reportedly the target of more than a dozen assassination attempts. 3 were prevented due to tips from Russian FSB employees who opposed the invasion. 2 of those attempts were carried out by the Wagner Group, a Russian paramilitary force, and the 3rd by the Kadyrovites, the personal guard of Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov. While speaking about Ukrainian civilians who were killed by Russian forces, Zelensky said, "We will not forgive, we will not forget. We will punish everyone who committed atrocities in this war. We will find every scum who was shelling our cities, our people, who was shooting the missiles, who was giving orders. You will not have a quiet place on this earth, except for a grave." On the 7th of March 2022, Czech President Miloš Zeman decided to award Zelensky with the highest state award of the Czech Republic, the Order of the White Lion, for his bravery and courage in the face of Russia's invasion. Zelensky has repeatedly called for direct talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin, saying, "Good Lord, what do you want? Leave our land. If you don't want to leave now, sit down with me at the negotiating table." but not from 30 meters away, like with Macron and Skulls. I don't bite. Zelensky said he was 99.9% sure that Putin thought the Ukrainians would welcome the invading forces with flowers and smiles. On the 7th of March 2022, as a condition for ending the invasion, the Kremlin demanded Ukraine's neutrality, recognition of Crimea, which had been annexed by Russia, as Russian territory, and recognition of the self-proclaimed separatist republics of Donetsk and Luhansk as independent states. On the 8th of March, Zelensky expressed willingness to discuss Putin's demands. Zelensky said he is ready for dialogue, but not for capitulation. He proposed a new collective security agreement for Ukraine with the United States, Turkey, France, Germany as an alternative to the country joining NATO. Zelensky's Servant of the People Party said that Ukraine would not give up its claims on Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk. However, Zelensky said that Ukraine was considering giving the Russian language protected minority status. On the 15th of March 2022, Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, together with Czech Prime Minister Petr Fiala and Slovenian Prime Minister Janez Janša, visited Kiev to meet with Zelensky in a display of support for Ukraine. On the 16th of March 2022, a deepfake appeared online of Zelensky calling on Ukrainian citizens to surrender to Russia. The attack was largely deemed to have failed at its intended goal. The video is considered to be the first use of deepfake technology in a global-scale disinformation attack. Zelensky has made an effort to rally the governments of Western nations in an effort to isolate Russia. He has made numerous addresses to the legislatures of the EU, UK, Poland, Australia, Canada, US, Germany, Israel, Italy, Japan, the Netherlands, Romania, and the Nordic countries. On March 23, Zelensky was calling on Russians to emigrate from Russia so as not to finance the war in Ukraine with their taxes. In March 2022, Zelensky supported the suspension of 11 Ukrainian political parties with ties to Russia: the Socialist Party of Ukraine, Держава, Left Opposition, Nashi, Opposition Bloc, Opposition Platform, For Life, Party of Shari, Progressive Socialist Party of Ukraine, Union of Leftists, and the Volodymyr Zelensky Bloc. The Communist Party of Ukraine, another pro-Russia party, had already been banned in 2015 because of its support to the Donbas separatists. Zelensky has also supported consolidating all TV news stations into a single 24-hour news broadcast run by the state of Soon. We will publish Part 3